Well, hey everybody, my name is Stephen Lamagna, and this is my wife, Rachel.
Hi.
We're very excited to be here. We want to talk to you today about making an investment, and making an investment to reconnect and to restore your marriage.
Yeah.
So no matter where you are today, whether you're in a hill or a valley, this is something that you have to continually do. And so one of the key things that we want to remind you, and as a theme throughout our talk today, is going to be to make sure that the most important relationship that you have outside of God is with your spouse.
That's right.
So Rachel, you want to tell a little bit about our story?
Okay, well, Stephen and I'm from Chicago, and he's from New York. Do you want to tell him exactly where in New York?
I'm from just outside the Bronx area in New York.
In Yonkers. And we met in college. Both of us were just really dating or seeing other people. And we became friends and we started to talk. And I was really more of the pursuer, which if anybody gets to know me, they can see that I have kind of a direct personality in some ways. And so Stephen was more reserved and kind of wondering who is this girl that just was running into the cafeteria.
Strong personality.
And so I was definitely a little bit of the pursuer. But then after about a year, we got to the point where it was, let's date. And we had on and off dating for about 4 years. We were dating, we were not dating. And after those 4 years, we had graduated at that point. I'm skipping forward. If you want to hear the details of our story, we can have a separate date night. But we ended up graduating, and I moved away, and he moved back to New York. And I actually moved to this area of Sarasota, Florida, and this is where things completely changed.
They switched. So
Yeah.
I became more of the pursuer, and Rachel became more of the pursued. And it was good for us to have that balance on both sides, and for us to each understand what it was like. But then after about 4 more years after college of me pursuing her, then finally Rachel moved to New York.
Packed a
where I was
bag,
at.
just went to New York and
Got an apartment.
Got myself a little apartment, had no job.
And within 9 months from there, we were married.
And we were
And
married, yeah.
It was at the point where things were just right, and there was peace in the situation.
Yeah. And we had a friend in college, actually Stephen's cousin Seth, say that we were always in the same book, but never on the same page or the same chapter. And so for years we did this balance, and I really believe in my heart it was because I needed to experience Stephen as the pursuer. And it kind of, not to get into scripture, but it talks about that in God is pursuing us, and I needed to experience that as a woman, that Stephen, my husband, would pursue me. And so I think that's really vital in the dating relationship leading into marriage. But then we're going to be able to touch on it in this session about really the pursuer in your marriage as well. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are we going to be sharing with you today in this session? We're going to focus on 4 key things to invest in and to prioritize in order to have a healthy, godly marriage. So the first thing is romance. The second thing is going to be physical intimacy. The third is going to be making sure that you plan alone time.
Yeah.
And then the fourth thing would be to make sure that you're having a spiritual connection in your marriage.
That's right.
Now, all of these things are things that you may have had or may have come naturally to you when you were either early married or early dating, because maybe you had more time or things were newer.
Right.
But then as life starts to go on, maybe you end up having children, or maybe things get more complex and other things take up space in your marriage. You tell yourself that it's okay that you don't need those things because your life has changed. And you start to accept that those things are not prioritized in your marriage. And we're here to tell you that those things not only can be present, but they need to be present in order for you to have a strong, healthy marriage.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the first ones, we talk about is investing in romance. And I'm totally a romance gal. So I love being romance. I love romance movies. I like the idea of it. The funny thing is that Stephen tried all through our dating to surprise me, and I'm not so much on surprises because I like to know what's happening and when it's happening and plan it out. But Stephen has had such a great way of finding the things that really meant something to me, and that was romantic. When we think of romance, I think a lot of times, wouldn't you agree, people are thinking of like the movies where it's like, I'm going to whisk her off to Paris, and and that would be wonderful. But in reality, the romance is something that that just has meaning for you. And so I think that really speaks to our 5 love languages. Is if you've ever read that book, I'd encourage you to read it. But and we're going to start going through it again. But really, it speaks to what is your love language, and then how can you be romanced. And these are non-sexual things. These are things that do not involve actual sexual intimacy. These are other things. So reminding your spouse of why you love them, and not only it reminds them of why they love you, and it just kind of brings that all back around, and treating your spouse like a spouse and not a roommate. Especially when you get into kids, you no longer are, focused on just one another. And do you want breakfast in the morning? I'll bring it to you in bed. But rather, you're focused on the kids and the house and this and that. And so you don't want this relationship to become your college roommate where you're hoping they'll just take out the garbage and then, don't snore at night so I can sleep. But it's a daily thing to remember that how you were when you were dating, and what it was like when you were first meeting each other.
Romance is something that you have to work at. This is not something that just comes easily.
Right.
This is something, again, that you have to make an investment in and take the time to do it.
So I want to touch a point on just words of affirmation, because that was something that I needed. And Stephen and I will talk about planning and date night in a little bit, but we were, I think, on a date, wasn't it? We were on a date, and I just said, I really don't feel appreciated. I'm an exhausted mom, and I'm working, and I'm cleaning the house and doing so many other things, and I just didn't feel that I was being appreciated for that. And it wasn't looking like I wanted a gold medal, but I just wanted to know that he saw those things. And so
I noticed that she had been writing words of affirmation to our children inside of their lunch boxes every day. And I just knew that that was the idea that God had given me of how I could affirm her. So for the next couple of weeks, every couple of days, I would write on a Post-it note something that would affirm her and affirm her as my wife, and just show her and make her feel loved and romanced. And so every day I would write a note, and I would put that note where it would correspond to the message. So, for example, on her mirror, I put a note about her beauty. On the door walking in from the garage, I put a note about how I just appreciated that she took the kids to school so often. Which
I leave on the door and don't take off so everyone can see.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are some of the things that we have, that I've been able to get ideas and be able to work at these ideas. I could have been lazy, and I could have not taken the initiative to do these things. But this is something, and a great example of what romance is inside of a marriage, and it just doesn't come easy. Sometimes it takes creativity and hard work.
Yeah. And it meant so much to me because it wasn't something that maybe he found romantic. So women, you're going to relate to this statement, I think. It's nice to receive a gift from your husband, but if it's a gift like lingerie, obviously it's leading towards something that maybe he's thinking about, and that's great, and we want that. But this was a gift for me. This was a gift that had meaning for me, and they are just literally sticky pads. There's sticky notes all over our house, and I leave them up for multiple reasons. I think because I don't want to take them down. I love them. They have meaning to me. But I also love that our kids, especially our daughter who's 7, can read, and she reads that daddy says, thank you for your hard work, or, thanks for brushing the kids' teeth, or whatever it might be. She's reading that, and she's seeing. So now, speaking to the kids, for your children, she's seeing an example of what romance looks like in the physical, not just the intimate romance that she'll experience, God willing, in marriage, but in the day-to-day romance.
Yeah.
So
romance in marriage is about looking at, no marriage is perfect and no one's romance is perfect. So it's about looking at the problems or the challenges, the issues that you have in your relationship, and then responding in a creative and romantic way.
Right. And we didn't get it right all the time. We've missed each other many times throughout the years, but I think that this is just one way that we're able to communicate, and it really has meaning for us. Yeah. So speaking on moving into a different type of romance.
So the second topic, so that was romance. The second topic is all about physical intimacy and how it takes time, effort, and commitment to invest in that physical intimacy. Now, I like the fact that we have separated this in this session because a lot of people automatically assume romance and part of romance is sexual. So I like the fact that we separated this because romance is not always necessarily physical. So Genesis 2:24 and Ephesians 5:31 talk a lot about how God has created sex for our oneness. So not only obviously is it for reproduction, but God has created it and designed it so that it's an actual tool that can help us become more one. You may be thinking about a time when you before kids, if you have kids, you may be thinking about a time before kids where you used to have a lot more time. But now, as things come into your marriage, you have to learn how to prioritize your time. And this is just one of those things that we need to learn how to prioritize.
And I mean, we got to be honest. We struggled. Like at the beginning of the marriage, it was great. I feel like we worked and we had our time together, is what we'll call it. And we made sure that was going to happen because really we didn't have too many other things vying for that time. But come on, ladies and parents in the room, if you're about to have your time together and you hear a knock on the door and it's a kid saying, "I'm hungry," well, that just killed the mood. Like we're done. Like we're not in the mood anymore, And so we really struggled, I would say, for the past many years of, Stephen is physical touch. He wants me to be, connected with him physically, and that's intimacy. And for men, I absolutely believe men, it is a physical thing, whereas for women, it's more of a mental thing. And I have to be in the game, you know what I mean? And we just weren't in the game, or I wasn't. And so that caused really just a discord, dissension, really, because a disconnect. Thank you. We weren't connecting in that way, and we're going to talk a little bit about that helping to prevent temptation and other areas. But this is something that we really struggled with, and we had to find some ways that would help us to be at the same page when it came to physical intimacy. Stephen, I think, is, can I say this? Ready to go. Okay. Like he's pretty much ready to go. But I was more like, I need to feel pretty and I feel fat and like there was just so much going on. Or the kids, I'm tired. They're going to wake up. Like this isn't fun. And so we're going to talk on this in just a minute because this is the part I love, is the plan. But one thing that we're going to talk about is putting a trip together, whether it's a staycation or you go somewhere that you've always dreamed about together. But every year we started planning a trip because it gave us the opportunity to not just romance each other every once in a while, but we would look forward to this time frame that we got to really be on a honeymoon again. And so I buy lingerie, and that lingerie makes me feel good, and it does something for me as it. I don't even know if he needs it, but it feels, it helps him.
It definitely does something.
It does something for him too. But I'm just saying, like, those are some things that we were doing that we used to do, and we really struggled with that for years, especially during the pregnancy and all of the pregnancies. We have 2 kids. And so I think that that's important to note, that it's not always going to be like your honeymoon, but there are ways to make it stronger and better, and you can improve on it. So
one of the other things we want to talk about with physical intimacy is how it is a gift, right? We've talked about how it's a gift, but it's also a commandment from God. So 1 Corinthians 7, 3-5 talks a lot about how God has given us this gift as a married couple. but we also need it as it's a commandment to make sure that you're doing that often so that you actually are guarding against temptation.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So.
Honestly, I've said this to some other women. I've said this to girls in my young adults group that are getting married, and I said, you can trust your spouse as long as you feel they're trustworthy, right? But I don't trust the enemy. And that's where the enemy can bring in temptation if you are not having the oneness of physical intimacy. And not to mention, ladies, that it is a form of exercise and it helps men's prostate health as well. So we can always look at it in the positive of a longer life. So do you want to touch on, we're moving into now a little bit of the plan, which I love, in time alone.
Yeah. So number 3 is investing in a plan for time alone. Time is so precious, and I want to speak to all the men here. You are the protector and leader of this home. So we want you to stand in front, and my suggestion is that especially with planning for time, leading means taking the lead. So you may not be the best at it, and actually in our relationship, Rachel is the planner. I am by no means the planner. But when I say lead, it's about taking the first swing. So recently, we had been struggling with our date time. And we just weren't prioritizing it. We were doing pretty poorly at it. And that affects a lot of things when you just don't have time together.
We were just having more group dates.
Yeah, so Rachel's job is to invest in other people.
And we love being with people.
We love that. And we were doing a lot of investing in others, but we weren't taking the time to prioritize and invest in ourselves. So what I did was I took the lead. And even though I'm not the planner, I made sure that we have a weekly date. So now every Sunday, before we plan anything in our week, we now make sure that we have the date, the weekly date, whether it's a lunch date or a dinner date, as the most important and first thing that we plan. So instead of now having planning our week and then trying to shoehorn in a date night, which very rarely you'd be able to get it in, we now make sure that we have one point in time where we're maybe having that alone time.
Yeah. And one thing to keep in mind too is, not all of this needs to be that you're spending money, you're going out, you're getting babysitters. One thing that I love, and we actually did this just the other day, but Pastor Craig and Sandy over at our campus at East Sarasota, they would talk to us about, just having a stay date.
Yeah,
and the kids would be inside. Now, depending on the age of your kids, I don't know. I mean, things could vary a little bit. You might need a movie to help them out. But they would go outside and sit on the patio. Now, Stephen and I, the other day, we were able to both be home at lunchtime, and we had our date at home. Yeah. We grilled some things on the grill and made a salad, and we just sat out on our own patio. So it doesn't need to cost you anything or require, a lot of expenses. I just wanted to touch on that as well. Absolutely. But it's making that time. And by Stephen, so even though I am so the planner, again, it goes back to what I said about our dating relationship, and what I believe for women is that we do need to be pursued. And when Stephen said to me, okay, on Sundays we are planning a date day or a date hour, whatever, it's not like a whole day, but like that would be great. But it's the date that we're having, whether it's in the daytime or the evening, and we're going to do this. And him taking that stand, like he said, that command, I immediately felt like that 20-something-year-old dating relationship of, oh, okay. Like, you want to be pursued. You want to know that they're putting it on the calendar, even though I know that I could have done it. This is where women, we have to let them do it so that we can feel the benefits of that pursual of it. So speaking on plan.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit right there about making sure that you have some time during the week.
Right.
To make sure that you have time together.
Right. And like we said, we were really, really bad at it for a long time because we were just going with a bunch of people, and I would just be like, hey, and that was it. Like, we would just be in this room together. We weren't going out just one-on-one, and then it was causing us not to communicate. And I'll be honest, even to do this session for you guys has brought even more connection. So this is not on the list, but I think we should also talk about serving with each other. Okay, that's another thing.
I'll talk about that.
Okay, well, okay. So investing in the plan.
But in addition to that weekly time, we also made a priority to have a yearly trip.
So we started this. Was this 5 years ago?
Yeah.
So we started it about 5 years ago. Our son was.
He was probably 2.
He was like
2 or 3.
No, because he's 5 now. He's probably like
2.
1.
Yeah.
Ish. Okay, he was somewhere in the young ages. And we decided that we really needed a time away. So we went away for 3 nights. And it was tough. I had anxiety. I was scared the kids were going to be okay, and all of this anxiety. I love to travel. We both love to travel. That's something that we share, and we've shared for many years. So this was an opportunity for us to do it again.
Yeah.
And so we went away for 3 days, and I remember it being a really challenging 3 days because I wasn't able to let go. I was
planning babysitters.
Yes.
Our parents, in-laws, making sure we had
everything
the kids
was
watched.
there, the food and
there was
everything.
a lot that went into making sure that we planned that well.
Right. And the thing is that what happens when you do that is that you set up yourself to be able to go and know that you've planned for this trip. But what we had to do was we had to invest in it. We had to invest some money. Now, again, I want to touch on this. You do not need to go away. You could do a staycation. I've even heard people asking in-laws, friends, parents to take the kids if the kids are in your family unit, and they stayed at the house. And they just spent 2 nights at their own home, and the kids were away from the home. So please don't think that you have to spend money and go on some big trip. We love to travel. So this is something that we suggest doing because it does mean that you have to put some money in the game. You know what I mean? You've got to invest in it. And so we spend the entire year investing, putting money aside for our trip, planning maybe where we'll go, looking at tickets. Stephen travels for work. So all of the hotels that he stays at are points. So every time he's gone, I'm going, okay, that's all right.
And that's an investment for both of us, right? So I'm investing by taking that time, and she's investing by watching the kids during that time.
Right. And I'm single mom in it. Well, he's gone, but I know that the end result is going to be this incredible time together. Yeah. And I'm willing to sacrifice to do that.
And this is one investment that pays off in major dividends. I'll never forget this first trip that we took.
Yeah.
So we had probably been there for a day or two before we were walking down right by the beach, I remember. And I remember thinking in my thought, I want to hold her hand. I remember thinking in my mind. And I'll never forget what it felt like to hold hands again.
It was so simple.
I just realized, I don't think I've held her hand in years almost, it felt like. And, it wasn't that easy putting this trip together, but the payoff was massive. Yeah. For us to just connect like spouses and not just roommates.
Right. And the biggest thing was that and it's funny because Stephen told me this story literally recently, but I've been telling multiple families or multiple couples that I think one of the biggest things I got from our first trip was we came back holding hands.
That's
so
right.
It literally can be the simplest thing that really keeps you connected. And women, to speak on the physical intimacy, I'm going to step back for a second. This trip, like planning this trip, brings about that honeymoon feel again. So like I said earlier, I'm buying by the way, Amazon.com is amazing. $13.99 lingerie. It's like the cheapest lingerie ever. And who cares? It's not staying on very long, but it looks great. And so I'm buying things and I'm excited and I'm planning. And, I'll never forget Amy Bizet Ladies Night, Joy in the Journey. And that's what this is. It's joy in the journey as we get to, we're not even on the trip and we're so excited about it. Right. So that brings closeness into your relationship. And you know what, ladies? I haven't even surprised him with the lingerie because I was so excited for him to see it that we've already seen it all. So now I have to get something else to surprise him with. So investing in planning a time away together, I honestly think is one of the most valuable things that we do.
Major payoff on that investment.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
We're going to stop here for those watching and see the rest on the actual event. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.